another fabulous day in the life of Tegan. I am back. I am in a new location. If you follow me on Instagram, you already know where I am. But if not, follow me. Let's be friends. And the next video, I am going to show you a day in the life of what my day in the life is, the new place I'm at. But first, I want to talk to you about something not so fabulous. I survived dengue fever, which was horrible. Horrible. Okay, so I've heard about like the legend of dengue. I have known of people who've known of people that have had it, but I don't think I've ever talked to anyone specifically who had it. Or maybe that's not true, actually. I could think of one person when I was in Asia years ago that told me that they had it. So I knew it was a thing, but I was never really worried because mosquitoes don't really like me. So dengue fever comes from mosquitoes, and it's really popular, especially in Southeast Asia. And yeah, so mosquitoes don't really like me. And so I never thought that I had to worry about it. Or in the beginning, I was getting mosquito bites, and I know exactly where it happened because I heard that technically getting dengue, usually it's because you're bitten by a lot of mosquitoes, not necessarily just one bite. That might not be true. I'm sure you can probably get it from one bite too, but it's more common at least that you would get it from multiple bites. And oh my God, I need to turn the AC on. It is so hot. I'm melting. I thought that I could keep it off because I don't want it to be loud in the background. But honestly, I'm melting. So I can think of where I got it. I was at a bar when I was on Phuket Island, and I remember I didn't want to go to this bar because it's kind of like a dive bar, and that's not really my scene, but the people I was with wanted to go. And underneath the table, there must have been some water because there were a ton of mosquitoes under there. And I just remember feeling them getting my ankle, one of their favorite spots, and they were just getting me good. And that had to be where I got it from. So when I was in Malaysia, so I was on Phuket Island, then I went to Malaysia, and I had a day where I met up with my girl, Shelby. Shelby was here on the island with me, and then we ended up meeting up in Malaysia, and her and I were actually walking around. We had a busy day. We were at the pool. We were on this journey for food because we were both starving. We hadn't eaten yet, so we were definitely hangry. And we were walking around Chinatown. We were trying to find a place to eat, and all of a sudden I just felt this overwhelming heat. I felt like I was getting really dizzy, kind of that feeling when you're really, really hungry. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm starving. We have to pick a place. Maybe I'm dehydrated because I also wasn't drinking a lot of water, and we were enjoying this amazing infinity pool. I'll put it here. We were enjoying the infinity pool, and we just were not drinking water because we were in the pool the whole time. And then we're on this journey, taking the metro, walking around. We really wanted something good to eat. And so all of a sudden it hit me. Yeah, I started getting dizzy, and I told her we have to pick somewhere. I have to sit down. I have to eat. I do not feel good, where you just can't even talk, can't do anything. And so we sat at a restaurant. We ordered some food. I got some tea so that way I could stay hydrated. And the food came and I couldn't even touch it. I looked at it. I was just disgusted. I couldn't even imagine putting one bite in my mouth. So I started feeling really shaky. I started feeling dizzy again. I started feeling really, really weak. And I was like, I gotta go. And the metro was only about a 5-minute walk, but I couldn't even make the walk. So I called a Grab, which is the Uber Lyft out here. I called a Grab to pick me up and take me back to where I was staying, which thank the heavens that I was staying with friends. I was staying with friends that I actually knew from Albania, and they were in Malaysia. And if it were not for them, I don't know what would have happened to me because they took care of me. They took the best care of me. If I was on my own, I don't know what I would have done because the first couple of days I just slept. I had a really high fever. I thought it was dehydration. That's what we assumed. We're okay, dehydration makes sense. It's so hot, not drinking a lot of water, being in the sun. And so the days kind of blur together. So it's not like I could take you step by step, but I progressively just started getting worse. And it was getting to the point where I was feeling body pains like I've never felt before. Like everything was sore, especially my feet, because I have like really bad shoes that I'm using. I just can't find cute, comfortable shoes out here in Asia. I don't know what the story is, but like a necessity is to have sparkles on my shoes. I don't want just some ugly, boring shoes. I want some cute, sparkly ones. So my feet were like pulsing. They hurt so bad. Every inch of my body, I couldn't get comfortable no matter what position I was in. My friends kept checking my temperature. It kept going up. It kept going up. It was really hard to drink water. I definitely couldn't eat. And it got to the point where my friend said, like, I think it was after 5 days, she was like, I think we need to go to the hospital. I think you need to get checked, which is something I definitely wanted to avoid. Number one, because hospitals just suck and are scary. Number two, I'm not a big fan of modern medicine. And then number three, like cost-wise, I'm like, ugh, I don't want to pay for a hospital visit. I do have insurance, but travel insurance is sketchy. You just never know. So, and of course I'm in so much pain. So the idea of going anywhere just sucks. But she ended up kind of like being like, no, we have to do it. Like I didn't really have a choice in the matter, which was the best move to make, because if it were up to me, I don't know where I would be right now. So went to the ER. I think this was it was at nighttime. I think it was even like 10 o'clock at night or something. They put me on an IV and I ended up almost spending the night there. Like we were there until like 5 or 6 a.m. and I pretty much just slept on the IV. They did a blood test and I came up negative for dengue. And I remember that very clearly in my head that they told me that. But I did come up positive for a bacterial infection, which is also common when traveling with like the food. It's just really normal to get infections. So they gave me some antibiotics and they sent me on my way. So I start taking the antibiotics and then I start getting worse. Like I start feeling terrible. I started throwing up. And so we assumed that I was allergic to the antibiotics because that's what it kind of felt like. I just started like swelling up. I don't think I was, it wasn't at that point. That came later. But I was throwing up, which that's like, for me, that's the limit. Like, okay, if I'm throwing up, I am definitely not okay. And so I think I went a couple days like that. And I was trying to keep taking the antibiotics just because I know you have to complete them, wanted to get rid of the infection, didn't want it to be worse. And then I was almost done with them. I think it was like 4 days later, still fever, nothing was really improving, still really uncomfortable. And she was like, okay, we need to go back to, this is what we did. They gave us the number of a specialist. So instead of going to the ER, they said, call the specialist at this hospital, which was an amazing hospital, by the way, in Malaysia. It was called the something Prince. I'll put it here. Grand Prince? The something Prince, but I'll talk about that later, but it was amazing. So the girls were so sweet. The staff was absolutely amazing. They were so doting. It is a very like luxe hospital. It looks like a 5-star hotel when you walk in. They have restaurants, they have like coffee, the coffee bean. They have like the center entryway and then you look up and you just see all the floors. Ow, I don't usually sit that close to that thing when I'm filming. So yeah, 5-star. Really, really beautiful, really, really clean, really great staff. And so I went to see the specialist. The specialist took my blood again. Actually, the specialist wasn't in, so I ended up going to see another doctor, just like whichever doctor was available, which he ended up being great. So he did my blood test, which actually before this I had 2 blood tests, I think, and both were negative for dengue. And then he takes my blood and he's like, you have dengue. I'm like, no, that's so weird. They just took my blood like a couple days ago and I didn't have it. And I guess the waiting period of like the incubation time of dengue is up to 10 days. And 10 days before I had been on Phu Quoc Island in Vietnam and I kind of was like, okay, I must have gotten it there. But also, my friend and I had gone to the botanical gardens in Malaysia a few days before I started getting sick. So that was another like ground zero possibility that it could have been there. And here's the kicker. It could have been both because the doctor told me not only did I have an active like dengue infection, but I also tested positive for the antibodies, meaning that I've had it before, which I've never been sick when I've been in Asia. I did get really sick in Peru. I had salmonella and a parasite when I went there, which was another like nightmare hospital situation, but not as bad as this one because I only went for one day. But they say that your second dengue infection is worse than the first. So he said, no wonder you're feeling so crappy. And he's like, you do not look good. Like, you are not healthy. I could tell just by looking at you, you're absolutely not okay. And he recommended that I get admitted into the hospital, which was the last thing that I wanted to do. And so he told me, yes, I want to admit you in the hospital. And I said, no. Like, no, I do not want to go in the hospital. Honestly, my number one reason for not wanting to go is I would have to get a COVID test, and I had not been COVID tested before. I completely avoid it. Actually, that's not true. I have been COVID tested, but I do the other options. I don't do the up the nose one. I do the spit test or the throat test, and they didn't have that as an option. They said I have to do the one up the nose, and I have my belief system around that, and I've avoided it for this long, and I wanted to continue to avoid it. So I said, I don't want to be admitted. That's the last thing I want to do. The doctor looked at me like I was crazy and basically told me, like, you really don't have an option. Like, this is the best thing for you to do because my blood platelet level is super, super low, which is really dangerous, which is why I didn't have any energy. I was dehydrated, all of the things. So I say, no way, I'm not going to the hospital. And my friend and I are there a little bit longer because I'm picking up medications. They're giving me medications really just for my symptoms. There is no medication for dengue. It's all about hydration and just managing the symptoms, which if I had known that, some of the medication I probably wouldn't have taken, but some of it I definitely needed. I'm all about holistic healing. Like I said, not a fan of modern medicine. I mean, if you're bleeding, if you break something, it's fantastic, but when it comes to healing, I don't like to take medications, which is why the idea of a hospital just is driving me crazy. So we're still in the hospital, we're picking up my medications, we're waiting, we're doing paperwork and all of that. And then my friend starts talking me into it, like, hey, you're really sick, your health is number one, like, I know X, Y, and Z are the reasons why you don't want to do it, but when it comes down to it, like, something's really wrong with you. And this is what the doctor says. She's like, he was being very matter of fact. He had great bedside manner. He was amazing. Like, it's not like he was like one of those quack doctors, because, you know, there's some of those out there that just recommend things for their benefit, not necessarily for yours. It wasn't like that. It was very much, he was very worried about me. And so we're there for like 2 more hours, I think, just closing out paperwork and stuff. And then I'm like, okay, let me go back to the doctor and let me just say, like, all right, whatever, admit me. So we went back up. The doctor was already checked out. He wasn't there. And so I had to go to the ER and like recheck in, resubmit, like start the whole process over again of like doing paperwork, waiting in line. Like, it would have been easier if I just had him admit me. But yeah, was there for hours until they finally, I think it took a whole day for them to finally get me into my own like hospital room, not just in the ER. They had me on an IV. I, again, was just sleeping most of the time. And then I ended up spending, I think it was 6 days in the hospital. So I was on an IV 24/7. Actually, it was like through here, which was really annoying. My hand actually was cramping for like weeks afterwards because I basically sat there for a week like this. It was so painful. They drew my blood every single day. Oh, it's still so hot in here. They drew my blood every single day the second they woke me up, which was my least favorite part. They'd wake me up at like 6 a.m., immediately start poking me with needles, which I was super dehydrated. So of course they're like stabbing the crap out of me over and over again. When you have dengue, your blood clots too. So sometimes they'd come take my blood, they'd take it, it would be clotting. So they'd have to take more blood from me. Like an hour later, oh my God, it makes me sick just talking about it. It was honestly terrible. And then my symptoms started developing. I was having extreme stomach pains, which could have been the bacterial infection that I also had, or like side effects from more of the medication, but my stomach was like excruciating, like someone was stabbing me, so I had to take medication for that. My skin started itching. So actually when I first got back to the hospital, it looked like I had a sunburn. Like my face, my whole body was super, super red. And then gradually it started getting itchy. And honestly, it's been weeks and I still have residual itching, which is no bueno. But I remember like wanting to tear my skin off. And so they were giving me medication to manage that. And other than that, I was just on the IV and I was sleeping. In the beginning, I wasn't really eating, but towards the end, I was able to eat, which actually the food in this hospital was really, really good. Really good. I was shocked. And I got to pick my meal every day. So I got to pick what I wanted for the next day. And I got to pick like what appetizer I wanted, which entree I wanted, which dessert I wanted, which drink I wanted. It was really, really nice. And I guess this is one of the most expensive hospitals in Malaysia, which to America standards was nothing. So for my 6-day stay, I ended up paying $1,200, which is completely unheard of, because if that was in the States, I would have paid like $10,000 at least. Because they also did x-rays. I think they were looking at my lungs when they did the x-rays. Yes. So yeah, $1,200 in the grand scheme of things is fine. I ended up paying that out of pocket because I don't know what's going on with my insurance. I'm still waiting to see if they're going to cover it. So if you're going to get sick in Asia, I'm telling you, because even paying out of pocket is not bad. Although it's not ideal, like I am not happy that I had to pay that money, that if I were to take that to live in Asia, like imagine how many months that would last me of living expenses. But for the level of care that I got, totally worth it. Totally worth it. So yeah, they were keeping an eye on my blood platelet levels and waiting until I got my strength back, basically. So that last day, the doctor was like, okay, you're finally getting some strength, you can go home. Went back to my friend's place and they ended up taking care of me for another like 3 days. I had more energy, but they were making sure I was eating, drinking, checking my temperature, making sure it was going down, because it still was like a little sketchy. And yeah, so it was honestly like 2 weeks of absolute hell. And even week 3, I mean, I was still having itchy skin. Like I said, I'm still having itchy skin. And I was really weak for a while. And they did tell me after I left the hospital that probably would take like another 2 weeks for me to start feeling better. So moral of the story is don't get dengue. It really, really sucks. It's really terrible. It was some of the most pain I've ever felt in my life. And every time I've heard about it, that's what I've heard. I've heard that it's absolutely one of the worst things that people have experienced. And in the travel community, especially if you're traveling around Asia, like definitely protect yourself. I don't like wearing bug repellent because I don't like too many chemicals on my skin, but I did learn, this may or may not be true. I don't think it was a doctor that told me, I think it was a local in Malaysia, but like the more melanin that you have in your skin, the less susceptible you are to it. I don't know if that's true or not. I mean, to me, it would make sense because the first time I was in Asia, I was in the sun like all day, every day, and I was a lot darker, and maybe that's why the mosquitoes didn't really get me. Whereas this time around, I'm not like laying in the sun all day long, and so I really like range in my skin tone. I could get really, really light, and I could get really, really dark. But I know that the locals don't really worry about getting dengue, so I don't know what necessarily makes you more or less susceptible, but definitely protecting yourself with bug repellent. And then if you're just getting mauled by them and just getting eaten alive, like leave the situation, get away. But it's one of those things that you can't fully avoid. And it's also one of those things where they can't really do anything for you. So that's the thing. There is no like magic pill for dengue. There is no one treatment. All they can do is hydrate you and just keep an eye on everything that's going on and manage your symptoms. So whatever symptoms you're feeling, they manage it with more generic medication. and then you just kind of have to wait it out till you get better. So let me know in the comments if you have questions about dengue. Let me know if you've ever had dengue, because I feel for you. Oh, another thing I learned, may or may not be true, is that you can only get it 3 times. So someone told me there's 3 different types of mosquitoes, and you can only get each type once. So now because I've had it twice, maybe I could only get it 1 more time. I mean, hopefully I never do, but if you know anything about this, also let me know in the comments. And yeah, stick around for the next video because it'll be happy and I'll show you a day in the life of where I'm living now. Thank you so much for being here, and I love you. Let's be friends on Instagram.
You came into my life and started a fire. You made me feel like I could touch the sky. Oh, there's nothing missing now that you're my